Hi, I've clicked onto the tropical tidbit for Thursday afternoon, about 4 p.m. Hawaiian time. As always, the thoughts in this video are just mine. Please consult the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, NWS Honolulu, and your local emergency management officials for the best information for your specific location on whichever island you happen to inhabit here in Hawaii. You can see that here on the satellite loop. We are tracking Hurricane Lane to the south, beginning to move quite markedly now toward the state. You can see almost a due northward motion now as we head into the afternoon and evening. You can still make out the eye, but it is more cloud-filled today, or this afternoon. You can see it is murky, and this is largely due to wind shear that has been imposed on the circulation. We can see that a little bit better in the infrared picture. You can see again the eye doesn't stand out as well, and the central dense overcast has become deformed by environmental flow coming mostly out of the southwest. You can see some of these cirrus cloud fragments here in white moving from southwest to northeast and impinging upon the circulation, and some of these are actually undercutting this cloud shield that you see here. So although there's plenty of clouds on the west side of the hurricane and it doesn't look that asymmetric from just a bird's eye view, a lot of this wind shear is occurring beneath that cloud layer, and so it is definitely impacting the eye, and you can tell that because the convective bursts are asymmetric around it as well since this afternoon. So the hurricane is weakening. However, it is still very powerful and dangerous. It passed over a buoy directly just a few hours ago, and this was the air pressure trace from that buoy, and it tanked all the way down to what ended up being about 957 millibars in the middle of the eye with light winds. And although we can't get a very reliable wind reading from the buoy because of the waves that it's entrenched in on the ocean, this pressure does suggest that Lane is still very powerful and a major hurricane, although it is gradually weakening now. That has been expected, of course, but again, this wind field, if it does come ashore in any of these islands, would be no picnic. And folks should be prepared for the possibility of tropical storm or even hurricane force winds, possibly if the storm gets close enough. The big problem, of course, though, will mostly be water. There's a lot of rain. You can see all this cloudiness up to the northeast of the storm. Because the wind shear is coming out of this direction, a lot of the rain around the outskirts of the storm is spread out on this side down shear because it's being pushed that direction, if you will, sort of. And so this has been very wet already today. We've already seen over 1.5 feet of rain in some places on the eastern side of the Big Island. This is the radar loop currently showing lots of rain ongoing, spreading across most of the main islands now, with only Kauai remaining mostly dry, and even it is starting to receive showers. But the Big Island has been seeing rain all day, and there's already been flash flood warnings issued for parts of the eastern coastline, and there have been reports already of homes being impacted and rescues having to occur. And so this is already a problem, and the core of the hurricane remains off the screen here outside the range of the radar. If that core comes up toward the islands, even more rain will fall. So this is by far the greatest concern, is the potential for multiple feet of rain in certain locations in the islands where the volcanic terrain allows a very large amount to be squeezed out of the atmosphere. And so do be prepared if you are in a flood-prone area, and heed the advice of your local officials in that case. Here's the water vapor loop, briefly showing again the shear coming out of the southwest, and this is really the race against time now for determining just how much Lane will impact the islands. The short-term track is still difficult because this very same shear, which is pushing out of the southwest and tilting the storm and weakening it, it's the same wind flow that's trying to push the storm northeastward into the Big Island, into Maui. This is the direction the wind is trying to push the storm. But there's low-level wind out of this direction underneath, and so these two flows are in competition with one another. Right now, the net result is that the storm is moving due north, but as the storm weakens, it starts to feel this shearing flow a little bit less, and if the storm eventually decouples, it will eventually turn left here, and that's currently expected to happen at some point, but at exactly which point is the important part. It could turn rather far away, sparing the islands from the core of the storm, though not the rainfall, or it could jam itself all the way up toward this area of the islands near the northern Big Island and Maui, and then turn left more slowly. And if that happens, then the core of the hurricane could impact some of the islands. And the models still disagree a little bit on whether this will happen. Several models do try to get this very close, and so there is still a distinct possibility that this happens. However, I'm going to show you really quickly that on some of these forecasts, there may be a good sign in the offing just in the last few hours. This is the current GFS run 18Z. The 6-hour forecast, valid 2 p.m. Hawaiian time this afternoon, showed the storm right about here. The 158 longitude line is here. So the storm was east of that on this short-term forecast, and was only about 157.7 or 57.6. And this continues north on the model into this area right here and never makes it to this 158 line until much later after the left turn. Same thing with the H-Wharf, showing again here's the 158 line and here's the storm at 2 p.m. Hawaiian time, which has already passed now. This is already verified, and what we see on the satellite picture is that at the end of this loop here in the Hawaiian time zone in the afternoon, this has already made it to 158 west on the satellite picture. So if it's a little bit farther west than the short-term model forecast already, that might be a good sign that it's not trying to come all the way up into the island chain here, and maybe it's on a track that still takes it on a left turn prior to the core reaching the islands. That's the hope, and we'll see if that comes to pass, but there's very little certainty here because it remains to be seen exactly when the hurricane will fall apart, because that determines when the left-hand turn occurs. For now, here's the official forecast out to 3 days, showing where Lane is now, the expected north or north-northeastward movement for the next day or so, and this turn is going to occur slowly. So we're talking about Thursday afternoon right now. By Saturday afternoon, potentially still dealing with impacts of the storm in portions of the state, if not all the islands, still receiving rain on the northern and eastern sides of this storm. The problem is that, as we talked about, most of the rain is on the northern or down shear side, and this track keeps the storm south of the islands the whole time. So this side of the track may actually be pretty dry, but this side will be the wet side, and unfortunately that's the side that Hawaii resides on. So even if the track is offshore, as shown here, you might be spared, hurricane force winds depending on exactly where you live, but the flash flooding threat will persist, and certainly the high and dangerous surf along the coast will also persist. So do be prepared for that. Hurricane warnings are up from the Big Island to Oahu, and you can see the hurricane wind field here is actually pretty small. It is confined to the core, and on this track it would not directly pass over these islands, but again there's very complex volcanic terrain here, and that can wreak havoc with wind flows and cause much stronger winds than you might expect to channel through certain areas. And so there's the potential for hurricane force gusts to occur in these warned areas, even if the core remains pretty far offshore here. So again, be prepared for everything. This is going to be a long couple of days, and do heed the advice of the National Weather Service Honolulu, your local officials, and stay tuned to the Central Pacific Hurricane Center for the latest information. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.